Final Fantasy VI was originally released on the Super Nintendo in 1994. It's a turn-based JRPG developed and published by Squaresoft. There are a lot of different versions and releases of Final Fantasy VI, and I'll later go into the pros and cons of each. I own a copy of the SNES release titled Final Fantasy III in the West. But for this video, I chose to emulate the SNES version while using Final Fantasy VI Ted Woolsey Uncensored Edition, the translation mod and fan patch for the game. The original SNES translation, while solid, had to make a lot of accommodations due to the limited read-only memory and space on the cartridge. This resulted in a truncated and edited version of the original script. The Ted Woolsey Uncensored Edition mod makes the SNES script as uncut and cleaned up as possible, while keeping the nuance used by Ted Woolsey in the original game's release. It also uses various tools and patches to uncensor the graphics, restore character class names, extend spell names, and rename monsters and items. The events of Final Fantasy VI focus on the conflict between the Gestalian Empire, who want to conquer the world, and the Returners, a rebel group opposing their influence. The story follows the resulting conflict between these two factions and their effect on the world. 1,000 years prior to the start of Final Fantasy VI, the War of Magi was waged using magic that almost destroyed the world, resulting in the disappearance of magic. Since then, the world has experienced a technological revolution, with many innovations in machinery. The Gestalian Empire have secretly begun reviving magic to gather the strength needed to rule the world. You'll begin the game playing as Terra, a magic user under the control of the Gestalian Empire, in search of a magical being known as an Esper. The Esper then gets out of control, resulting in Terra passing out, and wakes up in a home in the town of Narsh. Terra soon joins the rebel faction called the Returners, once it's explained that she was being controlled by a man named Kefka to do his bidding. Terra then travels the world with the Returners to gather allies and get her memory back. They'll be putting a stop to the Gestalian Empire's plans in a race for magic to prevent the Second War of Magi that looms in the future ahead. It was really interesting playing a Final Fantasy game with such a creative interpretation of magic. Final Fantasy VI takes a widely used concept like magic and integrates it into every part of the story's world in such a grounded and important way. In the world of Final Fantasy VI, magic users are rare. In fact, the first time Terra casts a spell during combat, the fight stops so the other party members can express their surprise witnessing magic in person for the first time. All magic in the game can be traced back to a source, and it explains why some people can use magic and others can't. More importantly, the story illustrates the importance, impact, and strength of magic. The constant pursuit of magic becomes the central struggle, and through the past experience of the War of Magi, we can clearly imagine what could happen if the world's magic is abused. The negative outcomes of magic abuse is illustrated beautifully throughout the events of the game. Different groups want to use magic for their own ends. The Gestalian Empire use it as a tool for war to take over the world. The Returners use it to gain the strength they feel is needed to oppose the Gestalian Empire. Others hide their magic from humans in order to live in peace. Terra becomes the bond that connects these different types of people together and creates interesting character interactions. There are a lot of characters in Final Fantasy VI, 14 playable characters in total, making this the most in any Final Fantasy game. The characters introduced all come from unique backgrounds with their own life experiences, becoming valuable in their own way. The character writing, along with the world building, are some of the game's strongest aspects. Final Fantasy VI contains so many endearing and lovable characters. The pacing of the story is actually really clever. You start the game playing as Terra, an outsider for all intents and purposes, who in the opening hours breaks free from mind control by the Gestalian Empire, resulting in amnesia. By this time, a lot of important world-setting events have already taken place that affect Terra and the future party members. The steady introduction of these characters served to both flesh out the world by adding more detail, and to add more perspective and motivation based on their past personal experiences. A character like Locke, for example, is the first party member Terra meets. Locke is a positive, quick-witted treasure hunter that joined the Returners after losing a loved one during an Imperial raid. Locke provides Terra with a shared goal to oppose the Gestalian Empire. Terra has already been manipulated by participating in the Narsh raid against her will, resulting in death and destruction. So with no current direction, She clearly has a reason to hear Locke and the returners out, and is encouraged to join their cause. Locke convinces Terra to come along with him to meet Edgar, the charismatic engineer, king of Figaro Castle, and another member of the returners. Celeste in particular is someone who's cold but has strong morals, putting her at odds with the Gestalian Empire. As the game progresses, Celeste begins to open up and starts referring to the party as friends and allies. She's an interesting character in that her upbringing illustrates how cool the Empire is, and it explores the relationship between people and magic even further. I could go on, but in order to keep things spoiler-free, most characters have had tragic things done to them by the Gestalian Empire, providing them with the motivation needed to stand against them. Most characters don't really grow into having a strong resolve, rather because of their backgrounds, they begin the game with that resolve. What makes these characters interesting is their strong, expressive personalities, and the reward from gathering what is essentially an army of people to fight to better each other for the same goal. Throughout the game, you really get a sense that these characters have gotten to know each other and have built trust with one another, using that trust to push through hardships together. As the story goes on, you learn more about the world and its scarred past. I was engaged at every turn learning about Terra's past and her relationship with magic and the Espers. The conflict was interesting. Gestalt himself is a pretty one-dimensional person. He's a manipulative person whose only desire is to conquer the world. It's the people working underneath Gestalt that provide an interesting contrast to him, that make for a compelling story. There's an entire army working under Gestalt, from commander to general and even the average soldier. All of these characters, impressively including the soldiers, get dialogue that humanizes them. They get a voice. They act and react to events happening as a result of their actions. Another very different face, but the most important face of the Gestalian Empire, is the main antagonist of Final Fantasy VI, Court Mage Kefka. I think what makes Kefka so memorable is that there's a typical bad guy leading the Gestalian Empire. Gestalt gives you this idea in your head of how you think the story's gonna go. Final Fantasy VI then takes that expectation and introduces Kefka. Kefka's bombastic and unapologetic evil made him stand out. His actions are so chaotic that they disrupt the unity of the Empire that he's a part of. He becomes such a disruptor that even the grunt soldiers start to question their own morality, while others defect from the Empire entirely after witnessing his actions. This clearly communicates to the player that something is seriously wrong. As his actions get more and more irrational, it becomes intriguing figuring out what his true intentions are and what he's planning next. Kefka is an ever-present character in the story, whether it's due to his direct action or an obstacle due to the result of his actions. He is an active variable that needs to be dealt with. The weight of his actions is illustrated through the events of the story, especially during the game's second half. Despite being pure evil, his motivations are such that are still a fault of his human emotions, and another result of the Gestalian Empire's cruelty. The fact that there's even a little bit of humanity to explore in a character like this is a really impressive feat. With the story beats front and center, you'll be given objectives needed to continue to the next point of interest. You'll travel from town to town while exploring caves and dungeons. The further you get, the more of the map you'll have access to, expanding exponentially once you get the airship. In the original Super Nintendo release, you can't run. However, you can equip a relic called the Sprint Shoes to move at a faster speed. This goes without saying that the pacing of the game would be needlessly slow without the option to run. Equipping the Sprint Shoes to a character consumes one of the only 2 relic slots used to customize characters during battle. There's no good reason why the convenience of being able to run should be tied to limiting your combat potential. This was remedied in the Ted Woolsey Uncensored Edition mod, and in future releases by including a run button. Final Fantasy VI contains random encounters, and in certain areas you can be met with a high encounter rate, but you're provided with a good amount of tools to save time while navigating the overworld. You can pay to ride a chocobo in towns, giving you increased movement speed and no random encounters compared to walking. When you unlock the airship, you can fly directly to each location. You can even find a relic that only a single character can equip, but can eliminate all random encounters while it's equipped. Towns are lively and feel like a proper resting spot, giving access to inns to recover HP and MP, weapon, armor, and relic shops to purchase gear, and item shops to purchase consumables. Weapon and armor shops clearly show who could equip each type of gear and whether the stats are higher or lower than what's currently equipped. There's also an option to equip optimal gear using anything in your inventory. It uses pure stat numbers to decide and doesn't keep weapon or armor abilities in mind. But if you don't care about min-maxing, it's a way to keep the game really simple. One minor annoyance is that the NPCs move around at seemingly random, and they can block your path frequently. It would have been easy to program them to move away if you try to walk into them, or allow you to walk through them if you walk at them for a short enough period. The money balance is fair. You always have a lot of money, but it's because you have a larger than average number of party members to manage equipment for. If you take your time and explore the world, you'll find plenty of secrets and meaningful bonus rewards from magicite, equipment, to even optional party members. Another huge compliment to a game of this era is how well most secrets are communicated through events and NPCs. Most NPCs are worth talking to, and provide proper hints to finding valuable items. Nothing felt too cryptic, unless it was supposed to be a well-kept secret. One of the defining aspects of Final Fantasy VI is how much freedom the player is given during the game's second half. The second half is all about building your strength until the final dungeon. So each side quest directly strengthens your party by gaining experience, gathering more party members, and finding more powerful magicite and equipment. Technically, most of the stuff you do during this half of the game is optional, but you'll need more party members in order to make the final dungeon easier. You're incentivized to do more side quests because each one provides you with a clear improvement in strength. The reward for all of your hard work being felt immediately upon selecting your party for the final dungeon. These goals also serve to complement the themes, bringing people together from all kinds of backgrounds, forming trust between themselves that are strong enough to stand up to those wanting to take everything away. Final Fantasy VI includes turn-based JRPG combat that contains an active time battle mechanic that was introduced in Final Fantasy IV. Each playable character contains their own bar that once filled can queue up for an attack. After a brief delay, the command will be executed. That delay is what makes combat interesting. Planning for both before and after an enemy attack is important, plus the ability to pass and choose what order your available party members attack in adds a small layer to strategy in combination with the large number of abilities and strategies to choose from. Additionally, if you have trouble, you can set the battle system to wait so that the meter progression stops for everyone once a single party member's bar is filled. The main commands available to you are your basic attack, unique character commands, magic, items, defend, run, and switch rows. Each character has their own unique stat distribution, character class, and special commands that make them play differently. Sabin the monk, for example, has this really cool ability called Blitz that allows him to input commands similar to that of a fighting game. When a new Blitz has been learned through level up, it can be input during Sabin's turn to execute a wide variety of moves. Cyan's Bushido ability allows him to charge a bar that cycles through up to 8 different attacks. Each character can only be equipped with weapons and armor that fit their class, further personalizing their stats. 2 relics can be equipped per character, adding bonus abilities ranging from haste being applied automatically, more damage, and null certain status ailments. Because only certain people are gifted with magic abilities in this world, you'll soon begin the hunt for espers that bestow the user their power with an item called Magicite. Equipping Magicite to party members gives them access to a once per battle summon, and allows them to learn that summon's skills through gaining magic points. This concept is really well implemented both from a story and gameplay perspective. Espers gifting Magicite can provide magic to people who normally can't use it. It enforces the important and strength magic provides to the plot. Hunting for Magicite becomes really meaningful and rewarding side content. You're rewarded with powerful spells not just from grinding like a traditional JRPG, but through exploration by finding espers and Magicite throughout the world. You can change from the front row to the back row anytime during combat, and when in the back row you deal less damage, but you also take less damage. I didn't use this much for normal encounters as there's no need for it. I really only used it twice early during boss battles, once with Ultros and once with the first Kefka fight. Ultros will make a comment about someone before he hits them, so sending those characters that fit his description to the back row will minimize damage from his strongest attacks, teaching you how to make use of the different rows. With Kefka's fight, there are moments in the game where you have to split into multiple parties to stop approaching enemies from reaching your side. These sections provide quick thinking and back-to-back combat that actually test your team's endurance. Kefka's first fight was the conclusion of one of these segments. I was underleveled in this area and unable to go back and grind, so instead I was able to experiment with my strategy and send my party members to the back row in order to minimize damage from Kefka's strong attacks. These short moments that utilize multiple party members is a really unique aspect of Final Fantasy VI that utilizes its large cast of playable characters. It requires moments of planning which party members complement each other, and quick thinking as you'll quickly be swapping between them for combat. There's also an entire late game dungeon that requires 2 party members to split up and solve puzzles to complete. That was very enjoyable to complete. Characters also rotate frequently throughout the story. You'll get to try everyone out and won't get stuck using the same strategies for too long. There are 2 dungeons in particular that have a difficulty spike unlike any other part of the game. The first dungeon, Cultist Tower, while optional, is in my opinion the worst part of Final Fantasy VI. This dungeon works unlike any other in the way that you're restricted to only using magic. You can't use any attacks or character-specific abilities. On top of that, the enemy levels here are some of the highest in the game besides the final dungeon. What's truly terrible is enemy encounters in this dungeon give you a false sense of preparedness multiple times. The first few floors have enemies that are much lower in level. You'll think that you're ready to take on this dungeon just to find enemies that are meant to be fought at least 20 levels higher further up in the same dungeon. When you get to the higher floors, you'll get game overs and need to go back and grind outside of the dungeon and return. But once you've grinded, you are yet again met with a false sense of preparedness. Get to the boss of the dungeon and you'll be met with a proper but challenging fight. The catch is, before he dies he always casts Ultima, which always one-shots your party. There are a few ways around this, but the one that makes the most sense is casting the spell Re-Raise, which automatically revives the target the next time they're KO'd. How do you get this spell? From an Esper that's in a completely different dungeon. So I left, completed the other dungeon, obtained Re-Raise, and beat the boss. You think you'd be done after that, right? Well, no. You have to walk back down the tower and then you're free. The entire Cultist Tower is just a set of stairs repeated for 4 screens, making it a visually unappealing dungeon as well. Enemies have really tricky affinities and spells, including Reflect, and the boss changes his affinities after every hit they take. On top of that, you can't run from any of these battles. All of these aspects are things that can be played around, but in combination of not being able to use magic, the level spike, and the difficulty spike is really just jarring compared to the rest of the game. Finally, in its defense, it's a completely optional dungeon, and you get a really powerful relic for completing it. The other difficulty spike would be the final dungeon in the game. I'll start by saying it is the final dungeon, so I'm glad it's challenging. It was an enjoyable dungeon with unique features. For example, the more side quests you do during the second half of the game, the easier the dungeon will be. You'll split into 3 parties and take turns solving puzzles and fighting bosses to progress through the dungeon. My complaint comes from the fact that there's no natural level progression between any content in the second half of the game into the final dungeon. At this time, I only had 4 party members that were an appropriate level due to grinding for the Cultist Tower. But I now had 2 other parties of characters that needed more experience to even stand a chance during anything in the final dungeon. Because the combat in the dungeon is some of the hardest in the game, and because you're split into 3 parties, you'll either have to grind right before you enter the dungeon, or grind on the spot in the dungeon. Final Fantasy IV and V came out during the first few years of the Super Famicom's release. Those games looked fine, but there's a clear leap in quality when you put them side by side with Final Fantasy VI. Environments in Final Fantasy VI are gorgeous, locations are extremely detailed, providing a sense of depth, and the colors pop. Caves contain stalagmites, rickety-looking bridges, and light will pour in through an entrance or sometimes through the ceiling. There's plenty of unique locations to explore, like the Phantom Train and the Opera House. My only problem is that most of the towns feel exactly the same. Towns will reuse the same buildings and environments. It results in them blending together and not feeling distinct. It's weird because there's examples of towns that do it right. Narsh and Zozo in particular that contain both unique environments and unique events that make them more memorable. Narsh is a dark, snowy town that you'll revisit multiple times for main and side quests. Zozo, while you could consider it more of a dungeon, is a gloomy, rainy town full of bandits and thieves that's brimming with the personality of being a dangerous, unwelcoming place. The forgettable majority of towns, combined with the limited map, made getting lost easy. The minimap at the bottom right of the screen while in the overworld is nice. It contains white dots that are very hard to see, but they do label the location of all of the important areas. What would have been a lot better would have been to include a full screen map that you can hover over locations to bring up the name of each location. The Super Nintendo's signature Mode 7 is used well in most situations. Whether you're flying in an airship, riding a chocobo, or just walking to your next destination, the overworld is a large sprite used with the Mode 7 to illustrate the world of Final Fantasy VI. Another minor gripe for the SNES version, which they seem to tone down in future releases, is the effect used when random encounters are triggered in the overworld. The sudden zoom in and out is a bit too hard on the eyes. Even though it's not a productive thing to complain about due to the hardware of the Super Nintendo, it would have been nice to see future releases adding more movement to the enemies during battle. Impressively, every spell in the game has a unique animation that is identifiable and looks really good, but the enemies themselves are completely still. Even just adding attack, ready, defense, or spell animations to match the party members' animations would be a lot of work for each enemy, but would be a visual improvement, and it would communicate more information during battle. I did enjoy the presentation of the final boss as the screen scrolls through each phase of the fight. It was really clever in how it communicated the scale of the battle. A handful of character sprites are used in combination with movement to convey emotion, actions, and combat. While they look odd in a few animations, they certainly get the job done and do a lot of heavy lifting, expressing a wide variety of interactions. Future ports add single character portraits that don't add any more expression, but do clearly communicate which character is speaking during dialogue. I assume portraits weren't possible for the SNES release, but later releases had the opportunity to include multiple character portraits for each character. This, in combination with the sprites and animation, could even better convey character emotion and action. Final Fantasy VI's characters were designed by Yoshitaka Amano. Amano worked on the character designs for Final Fantasy 1 through 6, and has a striking art design that can look odd at times, but leaves me speechless and in awe other times. Just look at this art of Terra, Edgar, Celeste, Cyan, and Kefka. I have a hard time not just showing you all of Amano's art. The soundtrack was composed by Nobuo Uematsu and contains a score that is not only reflective of the environments, but reflective of the game's themes. The soundtrack expresses the whimsical fantasy world, the looming darkness and danger, and the strength to triumph over it. A few of my favorite tracks include the opening song Omen, a foreboding, heavy, yet mysterious track set to the retelling of Final Fantasy VI's history and the events that led up to the opening hours of the game. The theme for Awakening is used in a couple of tracks and is this beautifully somber and iconic melody brimming with emotion. Floating Continent is an unknown alien feeling with bombastic instrumentation, with a whimsical melody in the background, pumping you up to take on the challenge ahead. There are a lot of different ways to play Final Fantasy VI, and there's no perfect way to play it. The best I can do is explain the similarities and differences between the different releases. The 1994 Super Nintendo release, titled Final Fantasy III in the West, is missing some of the quality of life and presentation additions of future releases, but that doesn't hold it back from still being one of the best ways to play Final Fantasy VI. The main concern with this release is the truncated and edited translation script due to the limited read-only memory and space on the cartridge. This original translation is still a serviceable way to play the game, but with the modern day support, I didn't see why I shouldn't look toward the Ted Woolsey Uncensored Edition mod. I played the Super Nintendo release with the mod installed, and it essentially uses the original Super Nintendo version script and updates it for accuracy and tone, maintaining the intent of the Super Nintendo game. While also fixing bugs, this ROM hack cleans up the dialogue boxes and adds clearer descriptions of in-game items and magic. After the original 1994 Super Nintendo release of Final Fantasy VI, it was ported to the PlayStation 1 and bundled with Final Fantasy V in the 1999 North American release of Final Fantasy Anthology. This port included new features such as full-motion video cutscenes, a bestiary, a gallery, and other small additions. The PS1 port and all future versions of the game now include a dash button acting as if the player had the Sprint Shoes relic equipped, and can be combined with the relic to move even faster. Because this is a port of the Super Nintendo original, it contains a nearly identical version of the original's truncated and edited script, along with newly added longer load times between menus, areas, and battles specific to this port. In 2006, a remake of Final Fantasy VI was released on the Game Boy Advance, titled Final Fantasy VI Advance. This version of the game includes a brand new translation much more faithful to the original Japanese script. The game includes 2 bonus dungeons, Dragon's Den and the Soul Shrine, 2 new super bosses, 4 new espers, and new equipment. The game includes updates to the visuals, and additions like reworked menus, a bestiary, and the addition of even more character portraits. This is considered to be one of the best official releases of Final Fantasy VI, despite the brighter, more washed out colors, and lower quality in audio due to the Game Boy Advance hardware. In 2014, another attempt at a remaster was made, bringing Final Fantasy VI to Android, iOS, and that version being ported to PC a year later in 2015. The art style, rather than being pixelated, has been redone to be a lot smoother. I'm personally not a fan of this art style. Character portraits look great, but character sprites and environments look really flat. The detailed sprite work of past releases adds a lot of depth to the visuals compared to the blurry, smoothed out look of this release. Art style aside, the mobile and PC release had their UI overhauled, and each with their list of minor adjustments to fit the new hardware. Characters' actions are split and displayed at the same time, removing the need to pass turns to the other characters. Auto battle was added to lessen the burden of grinding. There's no run button, but you can now move in 8 directions. The 2014 Android, iOS, and PC release of Final Fantasy VI was replaced by the Pixel Remaster version in 2021, which contains new pixel art inspired by the original Super Nintendo release. Its sprite work doesn't contain a one-to-one copy of the Super Nintendo sprites, but instead reimagines and expands upon the original art direction. It contains its own set of updates with new user interface and content bonuses like the bestiary, illustration gallery, and music player. As someone who's never played Final Fantasy growing up, I can only speculate why this game in particular was so highly regarded among its fans. It seemed to be the first Final Fantasy to really break the mold around what at the time made a Final Fantasy game. Its story didn't revolve around the crystals. Instead, the world came with its own identity and heavy tones. This world's history and lore adds so much detail to every aspect of the game. The War of Magi explores the importance of magic and the resulting state of scarcity in magic. It explains the mechanical empires and small but bustling towns. Even the main antagonist, Kefka, is a villain unlike anything seen before in a Final Fantasy game. Either from his direct actions, or as a consequence of his actions, Kefka maintains a constant, threatening presence throughout the game. Another seemingly groundbreaking aspect of Final Fantasy VI is its second half. The story is told in a way that really subverts your expectations. The type of progression here completely changes and provides you with really open-ended gameplay. It gives you the freedom to explore and gather strength, doing as many or as little side quests as possible. Overall, Final Fantasy VI is a satisfying and memorable JRPG. It's clear just how much this game did to drastically set itself apart from other games both in the genre at the time, and from other Final Fantasy games that came before it. Final Fantasy VI goes above and beyond with its world building and character writing to create a story unique to this game. It has fun, varied combat, with a large cast of characters that all become memorable in their own way. Meaningful and rewarding exploration and side content, with an open-ended second half. My only real complaints were how oddly balanced the Cultist Tower and the final dungeon are compared to any other part of the game. It's something you can't truly prepare for without knowing about it beforehand, and it slows down the pace of the game. After playing Final Fantasy VI, it left me optimistic to play more games in the series, and encourage others to give it a try themselves. Thanks for watching the video. If you want to see more like it, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. I also stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/RyanBeardy, follow me on Twitter at RyanBeardy, and I have a Discord with the links below.